Welcome to Bonnie's Beat. I'm your host, Bonnie Squires. We're coming to you from Radnor Studio 21 in the heart of beautiful downtown Wayne. We'd like to expose you to people who are making a difference in the community, whether it's with a nonprofit, a charity, a political action campaign, an elected official, an academic, whatever. Today we have somebody who's very prominent on the scene because of the headlines in the newspapers. Our guest today is Shira Goodman, who's the executive director of Ceasefire Pennsylvania, which is the organization that's fighting against gun violence in our state. Shira, thank you so much for taking time to come in, because I know this is a very busy time for you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's so great to be back at Radnor 21 and with your show, and it's such an important issue, so I'm glad we have some time to talk about it.
The images of people going to a Lower Merion public park wearing guns and holsters made me so ill. I can't begin to tell you. It made me quite nauseous. What was the reaction of Ceasefire Pennsylvania?
Well, we were very upset when we heard that these groups were going to do this open carry rally, that they were angry that Lower Merion hadn't rescinded an ordinance about guns in the park, and we believed it was a setup to try and provoke a confrontation, maybe get a better case to sue Lower Merion, which they now have done, even though nothing happened in the park. Nobody was cited or banned from carrying a gun. Nobody interrupted with the rally. I don't even think they were required to get the kind of permits for the rally that you need to hold a birthday party in the park. So we think they're bullies. We think, you know, they say they're trying to come here to show that they keep places safe. Then you don't need to come here and have your guns out and say there's going to be hundreds of people coming to a township with open carry rally. People wanted to stay away that day. People were upset.
People stayed away in droves.
Yeah, and I think it just shows you that if you're trying to make a difference here and get something done, you need to talk to people where they are. And what they did, I think, was a mistake. I think they miscalculated. And we know that people in this township now, they want to know, what can I do to get involved? How can I fight this bad law? How can we tell our legislators how we feel? So we feel, for us, it's helping to grow the movement.
People should understand that it was the state legislature, we know who's controlling the state legislature these days, that passed the law enabling gun rights groups to sue a local municipality if that local municipality, like a Lower Merion, I'm not sure if Radnor has also passed that same kind of a law, that says you may not bring guns into a public park.
Right.
Which makes a lot of sense.
So, of course, the local legislators here, who are very good on these issues, they voted against this. They fought hard against it.
Right.
And Senator Leach.
Tim Briggs. Senator Leach.
Right. Mary Jo
Daley.
Pam DeLisio.
Right.
Greg Vitale. Senator Leach is leading a group of legislators in cities who are trying to challenge this law as unconstitutional. There's a court case that's going to be argued in April in Pittsburgh, and we're hopeful that it will be struck down because of the way they passed this law late at night. They added it to an unrelated bill.
It was an amendment.
It was an amendment to an unrelated bill, and although that works fine if you're the federal government, Pennsylvania's Constitution actually has a rule that says all the parts of a bill have to be related. So the first part of this bill is about scrap metal and people who steal scrap metal from construction sites. You know, we've heard about that, you know, copper wire getting stolen. And then the next part is about giving individuals and groups of individuals, of gun owners, the right to sue our towns and get attorney's fees. So they're not related at all. And that's the other thing. These laws don't have to be enforced. Like I told you, nobody was fined for bringing a gun into Lower Merion Park.
Nobody was arrested.
Banned.
Nobody was arrested.
Nobody was arrested. Nobody was told you can't bring your guns into the park, and they can sue anyway. So they've created this whole new right to sue. It only exists to challenge towns that have an ordinance like Lower Merion's, or something that says if you lose your gun, you should report it. It's a completely special law. It's a privilege. It was a gift, and we're hopeful that'll be struck down.
Was there a name of an organized group that brought the guns into the park in Lower Merion?
I think that it was two groups. It was Concerned Gun Owners of Pennsylvania, which is kind of a Bucks County arm of Firearm Owners Against Crime, which is based in Pittsburgh, a statewide group of gun owners.
Firearm Owners Against Crime.
So those are the two main groups. There may have been something about Second Amendment freedom fighters, I don't know, who were there as well. I didn't go that day. We told people to stay away. We, of course, followed it in the press, talked to people who did go.
Yes.
and we were able to get our message out. But we think they wanted an audience. They sometimes do come to our events and try and provoke people. And we know that the people who support our work aren't that comfortable seeing people with rifles and handguns on their hips or their rifles on their shoulders. So we said, you know, stay away from the park, and we'll come and do our own event another time.
Now, let's talk about the antecedents of Ceasefire PA. We have to bring up the name of Lynn Honigman, who is of gold. She's just an amazing, she and her husband Harold,
Yep.
they're wonderful philanthropists. But Lynn Honigman, years ago, created a nonprofit called Moms Against Guns. I was a member of that, Moms Against Guns. And that eventually merged with Ceasefire Pennsylvania. She's a board member, correct?
Right, she's a board member, a great supporter. She and Harold are actually co-chairing an event that we're having. And yes, so we started a little bit before that, though, when the Brady campaign had these groups called the Million Mom Marches. And in 2000, there was a big march on D.C.
I was there. I was part of that Million Mom March.
There you go. And the
Absolutely.
Pennsylvania group came back and said, we need to do something in Pennsylvania. So that's how Ceasefire PA started, and it grew and grew. And then when we merged with Moms Against Guns and the Honigmans became involved, of course, that certainly helped with funding and raising the profile and attracting other funders. And we now have staff in Pittsburgh. We try and reach out to all different counties in Pennsylvania. We partner with other national groups and other groups in other states, and we've really grown. We find that our membership is growing, our donor base is growing, and even though it seems sometimes that there's tough fights and tough losses, like this law that passed, we use them as mobilizing tools. We think people are getting more motivated. People aren't giving up, which I think that the NRA and the gun lobby thought would happen, hoped would happen after Sandy Hook. The attention would die down. We're not seeing that. We're seeing more and more people getting involved. I spoke to a group of 5th graders in Philadelphia the other day. They were so prepared. They had all these questions. What can we do? They want to write to their legislators. They want to tell their parents. I mean, that's where it starts. And if we're reaching them that young, we know that the NRA is not.
It's very interesting. I remember decades ago, there was a very liberal Democratic senator from Maryland called Joe Tidings. He spelled his name Tydings. And he was defeated for one of his re-election campaigns. And he knew that it was the NRA that had funded it because they sent out millions of postcards and they misspelled his name, Tidings. And he could trace who was funding this anti-campaign against him because he was opposed. He was for gun control and opposed to all this craziness around guns. The NRA, they have deep pockets.
They do.
And they fund a lot of election campaigns.
They do, and that's what their strength is, or at least the myth of their strength. So in the past, they've spent a lot more money than the folks on our side of the movement. Now we have groups like Gabby Gifford's group, Americans for Responsible Solutions, Mayor Bloomberg, who are funding election campaigns. Part of the NRA's power is the threat that if you don't vote the right way, we're going to run that kind of campaign against you. So people get scared. So we have to try and make a difference. People have to understand that money does matter. So you need money, and like you said earlier, political action committees is a different kind of money than can go to a charitable organization. It's not tax deductible, that contribution, but you can spend it in different ways. You can talk about somebody's record. You can say vote for or vote against. And so Ceasefire PA does have a PAC, and we try and do that, and we did some mailers about Governor Corbett's record and about certain legislators' records, and we even did some robocalls last fall about how people voted on this Act 192 about allowing people to vote for towns and cities. It gets attention, so little by little, and now we think all the attention since things like the rally in Ballackinwood Park, and since towns and cities are getting sued, a lot more people are paying attention. They're writing letters to the editor. They're calling their legislators. So the legislators need to know people are watching. Voters are watching. And that will, as that happens, the money will come and the power of the NRA will be dissipated.
We are going to be airing the interview with Shira Goodman the day after the Sandy Hook team will have come to town. Let's talk about Sandy Hook, because that was still one of the most shocking occurrences in the history of America.
Well, of course, December 14th, 2012, Adam Lanza went into an elementary school in Sandy Hook. He killed 20 little kids, 6 teachers who gave their lives trying to protect those kids.
It was like shooting fish in a barrel. He goes into, how he got into the school is still a mystery, because you're supposed to be required to check in at the,
Right.
at the office, and we don't know how he got in. And he had already murdered his mother.
Right.
I mean, the whole scenario it's like a horror movie.
And I think watching that and watching those kids you remember that image of the kids being let out, but they're holding hands with the teacher?
Yeah.
I think America said we have to do something. President Obama, Vice President Biden said that, and they tried in the Senate just to expand background checks. The most simple thing you would think everybody agrees on. And the gun lobby went after their senators and said no, and they didn't even let it get to a whole floor vote. So, some people got discouraged of that. We said, look, Senator Casey and Senator Toomey voted for this. Senator Toomey put his name on it. We're making a difference, little by little. So what's
you have to commend Toomey for breaking ranks with the right-wing Republicans in his party that are really his base.
Right.
But he has worked with Casey on a couple of really do-good acts, and we give him credit for that.
Absolutely. And I think Senator Casey certainly had a very strong gun rights record as well. I think Senator Casey really had a personal change after Sandy Hook. If you talk to him, he said, I'm on the wrong side of this and I can do something. I think Senator Toomey looked at this and weighed the issue and said, one of his quotes was, background checks are not about gun control, they're about common sense. This isn't taking guns away from people, it's not hurting the law-abiding. People who can pass a background check are going to get their guns. And so
The
people who
background
can't...
check is looking for people who have a prison record, who have mental health issues.
Right, and that's serious mental health issues. It's
Yes,
not that they went
serious.
to a psychologist. It's
Right.
They were committed involuntarily to an institution. A judge
Right.
found them incompetent. It's serious. They have a protection from abuse order. People who shouldn't have guns. So yeah, we were proud of Senator Casey and Toomey. We hope that they'll both, if there's an opportunity, hopefully Senator Toomey, being in the majority now, will help make an opportunity to bring this back up. It's hard in Washington, so we have to work in Washington and in Harrisburg.
Now, let's look at Shira Goodman and your background, where you went to college, what you majored in, etc.
Oh, sure. I went to the University of Michigan. I was a history major.
As Shira told me before we started taping, why she ended up at Michigan, which is very interesting, because she was a very bright high school graduate. What high school did you go to?
I went to Abington.
Abington High School. And she applied for early admission to Princeton, which put her on the deferred list. So then she had to go back to the drawing board, and the family had connections with some alumni from the University of Michigan. She met with one of them, was impressed, and found out they had an honors program.
Yep.
And she was accepted immediately for the honors program.
Right, so I went there, far away to the cold, though it's been plenty cold here. It's great, it's a terrific school. My husband and I still do some recruiting and work with students in the area. We go back a lot. And then I went to Yale Law School, and then I came back home to start practicing.
Who were some of your favorite professors at Yale Law School?
Well, Owen Fifth, who teaches procedure. He's been there. He's just kind of,
He's an institution.
He's an institution. Stephen Carter, who actually also, in addition to teaching contracts, now he's a novelist. He's been grading some great books, and he's come to Philadelphia a few times to the library to speak about it. Certainly Guido Calabresi, who's now a judge on the Second Circuit. I had him for torts right before he got elevated to the bench. They're just some terrific people, and it's a small school, so you get to know everybody, and people are doing amazing things. In fact, somebody who was the editor of the Law Journal while I was there was on the cover of Parade magazine just this weekend. Gretchen Rubin, for her book, she writes about the Happiness Project. So she was the editor of the Law Journal when I was, just joining the Law Journal.
Oh, you were on the Law Journal at Yale.
I was.
Very good credentials.
Thank you.
How long have you been the executive director of Ceasefire PA?
Just 2.5 years. I started literally about 6 weeks before Sandy Hook. So things got Really
Trial by fire.
Trial by fire, really busy, really crazy right away. This became the hot issue in America. And although obviously there's a lot of things people are concerned with, education and healthcare and immigration, we have a lot of problems in America, it stayed on the radar. There's new groups all the time. There's new people who want to work on this. We have tremendous partners. You know, again, we've been lucky with Gabby Giffords and Mark Kelly and Mayor Bloomberg. We work very closely with his Everytown group and Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. And there's a lot of local partners from Philly to Pittsburgh and everywhere in between.
The Sandy Hook Team 26, they have 26 bicycle riders who came through here on Sunday, the 29th of March, because there were 26 victims at Sandy Hook. And they're riding down the East Coast from Sandy Hook to D.C. to protest gun violence. Every day there's some horror story about gun violence in our cities, our suburbs. The suburbs are not immune from this. I mean, I remember a number of horror stories that took place in Haverford, took place in Ardmore. Guns go across all kinds of economic lines and educational lines. Mm-hmm. And of course, the recent suicide of that 8th grader who took his father's gun, in Newtown Square. And it was right before the snowstorm, and they didn't know that he was already dead before they started looking for him.
Yeah, that was just horrifying. That weekend,
Horrible.
Everybody was riveted to the TVs. Where's Cayman? What could have happened? Did he get hit by a car? And then when they announced that on Monday, I think, people I work with, my board, I was talking to everybody. Everybody was devastated. Nobody had thought that this is how it was going to end.
Right.
And it
no
was
one
so
suspected
upsetting.
that.
Spending a lot of time talking with schools. I spoke to 2 schools right after that, and saying that we're here to talk about it, because suicide is something that's not spoken about, but more people, almost twice as many people die from suicide by gun than homicide by gun every year. So access to guns is a risk factor for suicide. And so it's something we do have to talk about. We need to make sure people get help, that it's not kind of hidden in the shadows, because it's a real problem. And if you add troubled, somebody who's troubled, a teenager, somebody older who's troubled, some kind of crisis, and you add guns in the mix, it is fatal.
I remember when my son was like in 2nd or 3rd grade, he liked to play with a boy his same age that lived up the street from us. But he came home one day and mentioned something about the father's gun. I freaked. I said, "You're never allowed to go into that house ever again. You can bring your friend here, but you can't go there anymore." Because kids have a fascination, especially little boys, with guns, but they have no idea what the reality is, because on television, they see and they have toy guns, and they don't understand what the reality brings to them if you have a real gun. And of course, all the hottest TV shows, there's a lot of gun violence on television.
Right.
All the time.
So, that's why Brady campaign has started this Ask campaign, that you should ask before you send your child somewhere else. It's a really hard conversation to have, but they give guidelines. Are there guns in their home? Do you keep them locked up? Is my child going to have, be protected from access? I just heard of a friend who told me that her daughter was going to some home for a sleepover, and the parent actually sent a letter and said, "Wanted you to know, no guns in the house, these are our pets, in terms of food allergies is what we're doing," but preemptively told people. That's important, because certainly the people have a right to have guns in their home, but safe storage is incumbent. Kids always know where the guns are. There have been study after study. They always know where they are. They find them. And that's why your pediatricians ask you about guns in the home and safe storage. Now, states like Florida have tried to stop doctors from doing that. You could see a fight like that coming to Pennsylvania. We will fight that hard, and we'll work with medical professionals. But as parents, we have to be really on the ball and aware of it.
I like the campaign that says gun violence is a public health hazard. Mm-hmm. And that's the truth. And you mentioned Jim Brady. Jim and Sarah Brady, 2 remarkable people. There they were, conservative Republicans, serving President Reagan against all kinds of controls for guns or background checks or reporting stolen guns, until Jim Brady almost lost his life when he took a bullet that was intended for Reagan. And of course, it affected him for the rest of his life, confined to a wheelchair, did some brain damage, but how brave of the two of them. And I think Sarah is still carrying on the crusade.
Oh, yeah.
And they are trying to convince the Republican Party that it's not taking away anybody's rights to say, you have to report a stolen gun. I'm always annoyed that the radios, the newspapers, the television, they want to be the first to tell you about gun violence, but they don't tell you how the person who perpetrated the crime got the gun. Where did the gun come from?
Right, that's such an important program. There's a great campaign in Boston. We've done some of that work in Pittsburgh, tracking back the sources of guns, because, you know, we always hear about the victim, you hear about the shooter, but what about the gun? And the truth is, a lot of these guns, they started off being legally purchased, and then they were lost, or they were stolen, or somebody trafficked them, sold them to somebody who couldn't buy one legally on their own. And it's not like the guns are coming in from some black market trucks driving in. They're coming from around the corner. They're coming from the county right over the line. And that's, you know, those tracing programs are important. The gun lobby has tried to limit ability to share that information, to get that information. Police departments are trying to do more. ATF is trying to let them do more. But it's so important for people to realize, you know, where did that person get a gun? How did that person get a gun? What can we do to make it harder for people who aren't supposed to have guns to get them?
It's very interesting. I remember when Governor Rendell had the entire Philadelphia legislative delegation, I was there with Representative Jim Roebuck, in front of a police station in West Philly, pleading with the legislature to pass, I mean, it sounded like mom and apple pie, pass a law that says you have to report to the police if you had a legal gun in your house and you discover that it was stolen, or you had it in your briefcase and somebody stole your briefcase. And the Republicans block that every time it comes up. And then I remember when Connie Williams was a state senator, she wanted to, quote, limit, unquote, the purchase of guns to only 12, you know, a month or something. I'm saying, limit this, only 12. I mean, what do you do with all those guns?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think a lot of people realize that in Pennsylvania, to get a gun, you don't need a license. You don't need a registration, you don't need training, there's no waiting period, there's not a limit on what you can buy, except you can't buy fully automatic guns. That's been since the 30s, unless you have a special license for that. But you can go into a store, if you pass your background check, you can walk out with whatever you want. And if you want to buy a rifle from me in a private sale, a long gun, semi-automatic rifle, well, you don't even need to pass a background check. And that's a loophole we've been trying to clear, this long gun private sale. So it is really not hard to go get a gun in Pennsylvania.
When I went to summer camp every year for like 20 years, I loved riflery. I was a terrific shot, but it would never occur to me to own a rifle or any kind of a firearm and use it outside the rifle range. I couldn't understand that. And to this day, every day you hear headlines of somebody, and to me, having the legal gun owner start firing at somebody who's trying to hold them up, that's as scary to me as the criminal who pulls a gun on a victim. Because who knows where the shots are going to go? Who knows where the bullets go?
Right. It is very rare that the good guy with a gun stops something in progress. It happens. I mean, we had this case last week in a barber shop in Philadelphia. Somebody came in to rob it. There was somebody who had a legal gun. He shot the guy. That's so unusual that he shot the right person.
Yes.
The police didn't come and see him with a gun and shoot him, that
Yes.
he didn't hit anybody else. Because in those kinds of situations, think about the emotions, the tension that's running high. And what if the police come in and see the good guy with the gun?
Yeah.
He's got a gun now. So that's very unusual. There are some people who feel safer with guns, and the Supreme Court has said they have the right to have one in the home. Some states allow them to carry them outside if they have the right license or permit. But you're right. We also have a right to feel safe, to be safe, to go to places and not have to worry that they're going to become firing zones, that we're going to be unsafe, that our kids are going to see guns everywhere. And so those are kinds of the things we're trying to balance now.
And the movie theater in Arizona, when this crazy young man goes to a midnight airing of one of the Batman series, Dark Knight, and just starts shooting. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. I mean,
Right.
where are people going to go? Just horror, horror,
Well,
horror
then,
story.
and then some people say to you, well, if I had been there with a gun, I would have made a difference. Really? Because how many more people might you have hit?
Yes,
Right?
absolutely.
I mean, bullets flying everywhere. Right. We have to do something. And so I think it's a real difference in, solutions to the problem. The gun guys will say more guns everywhere makes us safer.
Oh, yes, they want to have teachers be issued
Right.
guns.
And
What
we
a
say,
horrifying thought that is.
And we say, no, more guns don't make us safer. It leads to more killing. We want to block access to the people who aren't supposed to have it. Let's talk about prevention. Let's talk about the things we can do. And you can still have your gun, but the person who's not supposed to have it, we don't want to wait to the point where he got it. We want to stop him from getting it. And the thing with the teachers, right, there is a bill to allow Pennsylvania teachers to, if they have a concealed carry permit, to have a gun in school. I mean, that's scary. Like, what happens if they leave that unlocked? What happens if a student finds it? What happens, with these fifth graders I was telling you about? One of them said, what if the teacher, goes crazy and starts shooting somebody? What if they get angry? What if somebody takes their gun? So I'm sure there'll be a Senate hearing or a House hearing on that, and hopefully we'll hear from some teachers and from some parents, and we got to talk about it.
How many members do you have, by the way?
So we don't require people to pay dues, but we have tens of thousands of people across the state get our emails, and then we also have people on our regular mailing list. So we say more than 50, 60,000 people we're reaching in Pennsylvania. That's growing every day. Obviously Facebook and Twitter extend our reach, but those are electronics. Like, they can add to your numbers, but our work is to transfer people from being online supporters to offline activists. Will you write a letter to your editor? Will you go see your legislator? Will you invite some people over to have us talk? Will you invite us to your church or synagogue? And that's what we're looking for, to really transform people into activists so that they can be heard. So when they go to the polls, they're thinking about this, they're telling people about this, they're asking candidates, where are you on gun violence prevention? Where are you on background checks?
Oh, I like that. Gun violence prevention. That's a very neat way of encapsulating the whole movement.
Right.
And you mentioned Gabby Giffords, who is my candidate for sainthood, even though she's Jewish. Sainthood,
That's okay.
absolutely. For her to have, she fights every day.
She does.
To come back as much as she can, because she lost so much of her brain power. I mean, the young man who shot her point blank in the head, it's just a miracle that she survived when so many others, including Dallas Green's granddaughter, did not survive. And she's just remarkable that she can go and testify before Congress, go on television, start a nonprofit with her devoted husband, Mark Kelly. They're doing a lot of consciousness raising. They really are.
They are. People, she's a hero, and he's terrific, and he's a hero too. And they really get people involved. They raise money through their PAC. They've supported some of our work. They're very generous, and they're becoming a counterweight to the gun lobby, and that's what we have to do. Support good candidates, get the message out. They're doing a lot with domestic violence and guns, really raising that intersection. How deadly domestic violence can turn when there's a gun in the mix.
Absolutely.
They've been terrific on that. So we're lucky to have them in the movement. Horrible for what the cause was, but they've become incredible champions.
Now, let's put up the web address again where people can get information. www.ceasefirepa.org/greedy gun lobby, or you can just type in ceasefire PA. And on Thursday, May 7th, they're going to have a 15th anniversary celebration honoring Edward G. Rendell, Governor Rendell. Lynn and Harold Honickman, David and Rhonda Cohen are the co-chairs. It's going to be at the Comcast Center. It'll be a big fundraiser, right?
Yep, I hope so. And Governor Rendell has been a terrific champion, not just for Lost or Stolen, but since I've taken this job, he's been with us. He helped us with Pat Toomey. He's helped with the senators. He's helping spread the word about this terrible law where NRA can sue cities. He's just been tireless, and we're pleased to give him our first Keystone Award for Courage.
That's wonderful. Well, we hope to see everybody on May 7th. And our guest today has been Shira Goodman. And Ceasefire PA, thank you so much. And another 15 after you celebrate the 15.
Okay.
Thank you, Shira.
Well, I hope we won't need it, but thank you for having us on.